Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my game week 1 team selection. We've closed in on very close to what is the team that I'd like to roll with from a game week 1 perspective. I still have struggles right now. It is still Watkins versus Wirtz for me. Right now, I'm still on a Watkins draft and quite happy. I've made a couple changes and I have to be honest, I've been influenced by Spurs and their performance versus PSG. I'm recording this video right now after watching one half of football. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. PSG might still end up winning the game, but I have been impressed with the sort of back three that Spurs debuted. It looked really good. I don't think I even saw a single good chance from PSG within that match. And personally, I've been really impressed. As far as, what that means for my draft, I think that's obviously very good for game week 1. Could spell up some issues for game week 2 because they have that City game, but I'll talk about how we'll kind of circumvent that as we plan along with the initial game weeks with the draft structure that I have planned as it stands. We also got some news today, which was that Tarkowski, well, actually not Tarkowski, but Branthwaite has a hamstring injury. That probably means he's out for a few weeks. That means Michael Keane probably slots in towards this Everton team. I'm not sure if that's a gigantic impact on the defensive quality. Obviously, a lot of people have thoughts on Michael Keane, not many of them positive. And I can expect the expected clean sheets will drop. So that's worth mentioning. But that's also cooled me off going Tarkowski within my draft. Otherwise, the draft is currently rated a 91 out of 100. Per the Fantasy Football Hub AI team rating tool, you can get your draft rated by clicking on the link in the description below. And yeah, if you want, for example, the Hub suite to suggest you transfers to improve your draft rating, to improve your squad, if you want it to sort of integrate your chip strategy as well and give you dedicated plans, if you want to look at advanced stats as well, feel free to have a look at the Hub suite. I'll be also debuting some of the features as we go through this video. For game week 1, I also wanted to preview specifically game week 1, right? So just almost looking from a kind of perspective of this game, like what are the key points to look at? I think this game week, what I would say is very interestingly high goals for Liverpool. And part of this, I think, is the just almost continued flurry of defenders leaving this Bournemouth team that has kind of made them suffer. I think Spurs, of course, expectations, I imagine can even improve, right? Like, how do the markets react to potentially a good result versus PSG? But I realize I am recording at a very niche time. So maybe, let's say, by the time this video comes out, I'll look stupid. But yeah, it's little things like a really good performance from Spurs, them debuting a back five, them showing that they're actually capable of using set pieces, which is something we can't necessarily, I think, credit Ange with. These little things will sort of move the margins, and Spurs already have some really good clean sheet odds. What does that mean for the rest of their horizon? It could be really, really good. Other than that, I think we have some sort of light kind of things to look at. Like, let's say City, quite high, but not so high as Liverpool when it comes to team goals, which is worth mentioning. Chelsea, quite high once again at home, which once again shows you how often these models, these markets react to the difference in quality between the home and away fixtures. As to, let's say, the significance of a lot of these things going forwards, the point is we own players for certain fixtures, but as long as you can kind of optimize around certain runs, you're still inevitably going to have players in FPL who have tough matches, right? Like, I am most likely going to have a few attackers or maybe defenders who don't have the best match game week to game week, but over a sort of horizon or a sort of multiple game week window, the idea is to pick some of the better picks. And yeah, even if we look at, for example, game week 1, this isn't exactly, for example, a great Arsenal game, which is kind of why we're a little bit turned off from Arsenal, Bournemouth as well. Aston Villa have seemingly quite a close match, but I do expect there to be goals, and that's the significant point, especially for a lot of us who have been invested into this Aston Villa defense as we look into the preseason and are about to start the season. As far as my actual team, as I said, it is rated a 91 out of 100. So you can just quickly get your team rated yourself using the link in the description below. I think what's really nice about this season is when you look at the defensive contribution points and kind of all the rule changes, I think models have been very, very quick to responding how we can infer the potential changes. And clearly, of course, that means the way that we've approached the center backs, just to conclude really from a game week 1 perspective and beyond, obviously, for the rest of the season, is most likely going to be a lot of that influence from looking at the percentage success rates of some of the best players like Murillo and Tarkowski last season. And then maybe some team dynamic changes. So I feel like part of this is, if we're interested in Spurs, we're almost looking at this Brentford team from last season. How can that team from last year transform into a team that does a little bit more in terms of those kind of C-bits? And in the preseason, I think when you look at defensive contributions for these individual Spurs picks, I think we've seen some really healthy numbers. So that's a huge positive. The draft that I'm actually going with, I'll actually just walk through the draft in terms of the 15 man. I've chosen to actually go for Brooklyn for now because that's kind of what I feel like I need to sacrifice in the Watkins draft to actually get the players that I want to have in my team. I want some punts in this draft. I have some punts in this draft. I'm pretty confident about this type of draft structure. As I said, I am contemplating a Wirtz structure as well. A Wirtz structure means I save 0.5 million, and that might allow me to get back to a 5.0 goalkeeper. But is it necessarily the case that we need to have a 5.0 goalkeeper? No. I think when you look at every season, we have really good predictions about who's going to be the best goalkeeper. For example, Raya last season, we thought season long would be amazing. Did he really deliver that much more than the other goalkeepers? Not necessarily, right? So goalkeepers are a little bit more noisy, a little bit more random. I'm okay with choosing what I think should be the best 4.5 goalkeeper here. It might still be Petrovic, right? His shot stopping numbers are really good. So are Perry's. But generally, I quite like the Verbruggen Dubravka rotation going forwards, and I'm comfortable with Brighton as a pick. Generally speaking, Verbruggen was actually fit and ready to play the last preseason match, so he's ready for game week 1, which means he's ready for Fulham at home. For the rest of my defense, I've gone with Murillo. So the big change in terms of the latest draft is instead of not having Tarkowski and Murillo, which I'm sure a lot of people were extremely upset with, I've now moved into Murillo. As you can see, as part of that too, I've sort of moved off of Chelsea defense, not for any particular reason, but just the cost saving is something that I think I can sort of deal with within my team. Pedro Porro has stayed within my draft. Van de Ven has now moved into the draft, and I've gone and kept Anderson and Esteve in the team. So a lot of people are going to immediately think, okay, you've brought 2 Tottenham players in. That's a really good game week 1 team. You've got 3 home games at least with these sorts of players. You know, how bad is the team going to be for game week 2? For game week 2, I don't think it's too bad, right? Game week 2, we're actually looking at Murillo, we're looking at Anderson, and we're looking at Steph, who all have some really, really good games. Anderson at home, I'd much rather have than, let's say, any of the Spurs players versus City. So that's kind of my perspective or my route towards having a pretty strong defense in game week 2. I have a lot of confidence in this Fulham team. They're actually the sort of least the least performing, or most underperforming rather, defensive team last season. Fulham actually had some really, really good expected goals conceded numbers that actually put them within the top 5 within the league. So even though the fixtures aren't amazing to start, I'm comfortable rotating Anderson within the home games, and that's kind of the value that he'll have in a game week 2, for example. And specifically on game weeks 4 and 5, that's where the good Fulham games come in. That's also another opportunity to rotate out Murillo when he actually has Arsenal in game week 4, which is actually the one sort of really, really clearly poor Murillo fixture. In the midfield position, I have decided to make a couple changes. I've gone for Salah, Palmer, Bruno, Gakpo, and Jorginho. I do recognize that Gakpo is a punt. This type of position, I think a lot of people still have in their team is maybe Rodgers, who's now actually back in training. So I think, look, we've gone from Rodgers drops many eons ago, and I think a lot of people should reconsider going back for Rodgers, right? That's also a 0.5 cost save on Gakpo. That might get me the goalkeeper that I want, but I just wanted to mention that I do want to go with Gakpo to start. Does that probably put me in a bit of a risky territory where I have to maybe consider a little bit of an earlier wild card if suddenly Isak comes in and then Gakpo loses minutes? Maybe. But I still think Gakpo's minutes look really strong. In the preseason, they've been really consistent. We saw in the Community Shield as well, that was a full 90 being played. I generally have faith in Gakpo's minutes. I don't think Rio is a huge impact. Luis Diaz leaving is significant. And even though he might be the worst attacker within this team right now, when you look at, let's say, Ekitike, it seems like he could maybe operate on the left. We've also seen Slot mention that Wirtz cannot operate on the left. But generally speaking, as I said, I do feel comfortable with Gakpo to start, at least as an early punt. And then the punt that I've always been happy with, and I've even changed my team name around it, is Jorginho Rutter. My team name is now Rutter Woke Nonsense, and I think it would be unfaithful to the team name if I didn't have him in my draft. I think the key thing with Jorginho here in terms of selling him is João Pedro has left the team. This was a player who played 1,900 minutes last season. A lot of people tend to look at arguments like, what did the player play last season, without really thinking about the scope for the player to play more minutes. I think when you're taking such a significant player out of the team, Rutter actually then becomes almost potentially the first or second choice striker in the team. There's not much depth there in those positions, even though they've signed some new strikers. And then in the 10 position, it seems like O'Reilly's actually on his way out of the club. It seems like he's actually linked away to a move towards Juventus. As long as Douglas Luiz can move elsewhere, that seems to be one of the 3 players that Juventus have on their shortlist, and that kind of already shows an indication as well, I think, for Brighton to maybe part ways with O'Reilly, or where he is in the pecking order in comparison to Jorginho. I just tend to think that if you look at someone like João Pedro last season, his minutes were very consistent. but he played a mixture of striker minutes and 10 minutes. And there were many games where he would operate on the 10, starting from a 10, playing 65 to 75 minutes there. Welbeck would still be subbed off, and then João Pedro gets to move into the striker position for the last few minutes of the match. I tend to think that Jorginho could actually easily follow this route. Was he someone who actually was playing a lot of 90s last season? No, but you're now taking out, as I said, those 1,900 minutes. Is he going to get a certain large percentage of that? I personally think that that's the case. They haven't been linked with anyone too significant in terms of a profile to really take away from those minutes in those positions. So I really, really do like this sort of pick at this moment in time. And that's why I have Jorginho in my draft. And when I look at the season-long goal projections as well, he's really solid. As I showed within sort of my budget midfielders video when I sort of did that, he was very close towards Mitoma. So I do feel like you can get away with a cost saving here of 0.5. Is it a bit punty? Yes, because there's a bit more depth around the positions that he does play. Mitoma doesn't really have anyone competing so much with the minutes. It's almost Gomez potentially. But yeah, that's why I feel confident with Jorginho. I'm happy with him as a punt. In the forward line, we're going with Watkins and Strand Larsen. Now, Strand Larsen scored 14 goals last season. The one striker that clearly is missing out is that sort of position or price point of a 7.5. João Pedro has more than 50% ownership. Mateta seems like a really solid, durable pick. But I think Strand Larsen is very much within the same vicinity. It's not like he needed penalties last season to score 14 goals. He performed really well without Cunha. And the big add, or the value add, is this is a season long of Pereira as a manager who really improved the level and performance of the team. Cunha is gone. But as I said, some of the performances of Strand Larsen where he really did stick out the best was when Cunha wasn't playing. So I'm not too worried about Strand Larsen. Does he have the best fixture to start in Game Week 1? No. We saw the market odds previously in terms of like the odds for Wolves to score. But this is what I kind of mean with FPL, where generally speaking, I am comfortable with having some slightly poor fixtures here and there because I'm more thinking about what the sort of medium to long term is with someone like Strand Larsen. He still is someone for me at that 6.5 price point who's really good. When I look at the season long goal projections as well, Strand Larsen is once again a player that I really, really like because he seems like the most mispriced forward, especially if you take Solanke out of that sort of echelon, with Solanke not likely to start Burnley at home in Game Week 1. So with Watkins, it's a case of, once again, Watkins versus Wirtz for me. Some people will actually go back to the midfield and say, why do you have Bruno in the team? Why not just go Wirtz and Watkins if you like Wirtz so much? I still think that Bruno really gives a lot of value, and I think that, yes, he's gotten a price increase, but when you look at, once again, things like season-long projections, some of the fixtures, even the captaincy element in Game Week 3 where he's got Burnley at home, I really like Bruno for that reason. So I don't really want to book a transfer in advance to go for Bruno. Yes, he does have an Arsenal fixture here and there and a City game, but he's also someone who, even when he plays defensively, can add value within the game. So there almost feels like there's a really solid floor for Bruno. We know with Watkins, I'm not expecting for Watkins to suddenly fall back into the sort of position that he had last season when he was dueling with Rashford for minutes. But with more depth within this team, I think it's inevitable that Watkins isn't going to be a 90-minute player. More so maybe 82 to 85 minutes, being conservative. I've also seen a little bit of a pullback in terms of since Gassan was brought into the team, some of the sort of season-long goal projections for Watkins dropping a bit. That gives me some comfort in thinking, okay, I can probably do a Wirtz draft, maybe go with someone like Mateta instead, and I'd still be very happy with the type of teams that I have. But Watkins just has such a clean run of games to start, and it's really hard to shy away from them. And even within the case of Rodgers, I do think that Gakpo has a little bit of upside, especially to start with that really good Bournemouth at home fixture. And that's kind of why I'm not back on Rodgers. I've almost divested a little bit, but I'm happy to be on Watkins at this moment in time. It's a draft structure that I really, really like and always have liked personally. So that's going to be the draft in terms of the 15 players. In terms of how we're setting up specifically for Game Week 1, it's quite simple. We're just going to go with Verbruggen here. And by the way, the bench players are Dubravka and Gu. I don't think I need to discuss too much about this. I don't think there's another 4.0 goalkeeper for us to even really consider. As far as, let's say, bench boosting, I'm not planning on bench boosting, but you can always maybe bypass Gu and go for Junior Krupi. The sort of logic towards going for Junior Krupi is, what if Gu gets a price drop because a lot of people find that there's more value in other 4.5? I don't think that that's super viable in terms of logic. Yes, maybe Gu can drop, but who are people moving Gu to? It would really be Junior Krupi, but for Junior Krupi, for me to have good minutes for a good attacking team, which he is possible of doing, it almost would have to be, once again, another significant injury for Evan Nilsson, and I'm not really seeing that right now. So I think Yu is perfectly fine to start. If you want to go with Junior Krupi, that's also fine as well. But back to the point, what is my team going to look like in Game Week 1? So that's Verbruggen versus Fulham at home, which is very solid of a game. In defense, it's going to be 3 players with a home match: Murillo, Porro, and Van de Ven, all with home games. And then Anderson and Esteve will sort of assume the bench in that order. As far as the midfield, I'm going here with Salah, Palmer, Bruno, Gakpo, and Jorginho. Front line being Watkins and Strand Larsen. It's really not too controversial in terms of captaincy. I really think it's a clear-cut Salah captaincy. Did he have a good performance in the Community Shield whatsoever? No. But is this an amazing game on paper for Liverpool? Yes. Interestingly, when I look at a lot of the models over the next few game weeks, this might be one of Liverpool's best attacking games on paper, because it really does seem like a lot of people have harshly reacted to the weakening of the Bournemouth defense and sort of, decreases in terms of their team strength on that aspect of the field. So I think this is a really good Salah captaincy. I don't think there's too much to go against it. If you go no Salah, I completely understand backing someone else like maybe a Haaland, even considering a Palmer as well, who just generally has a home game with really good projected goals for Chelsea as a total goal margin, if we were to go back to, let's say, those market graphics that we sort of looked at previously. And that's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple standard team. Let's quickly jump into almost the interim plans for this team structure. So I'm here now with the Fantasy Football Hub team rating tool. This is the My Team tool. So once you get your AI team rated, you can also get suggested transfers if you're in the Pro Suite. And then on top of that, you can actually manage your team week to week and kind of see how it works out. If the FPL website is down, this is also how you'd manage the team in terms of planning it out. So yeah, treat it as a planner. You can scroll down below here, click on the button, which is to optimize the team. It then kind of fixes things in order, obviously showing me the players that I should be playing this week. And it's a really strong team, right? So that makes me happy. In terms of game week 2, though, shifting over to that, a lot of people will have the immediate sort of reaction, which is, okay, not exactly the best game here for Tottenham, for example. What's the way around it? This is sort of the plan here. Esteve, Anderson coming in with some pretty good sort of projected numbers as well. Even Dubravka coming in with Sunderland at home. So it kind of takes into account, as I said, hopefully the potential rotation between Dubravka and Verbruggen, and I don't lose too much value here in not going for a 5.0 goalkeeper. Even if I was, let's say, going for, I don't know, a Vicario, for example, I would still struggle in Game Week 2. So I quite like Dubravka hopefully being fit and available for Game Week 2. Team rating isn't amazing, simply because I think Jorginho is a little bit underrated, right? I think there's a case of, am I overreading Jorginho's minutes or am I underreading it? I tend to think that his minutes should be strong, so I'm happy to sort of bet on the upside there. As far as Game Week 3, if we were to optimize as well, once again, we can sort of slot our Spurs defenders back in, and then we actually have some home fixtures for both Jorginho and Strand Larsen. Game Week 4, as I've always said, is the problem child type of game week for a lot of us managers. It's one of those weeks where you don't exactly know what to do, per se, because it's not a great game for Bruno. It's a really good game for the Liverpool players that I have, but clearly my defense has some problems. And this is the game week where I think this is where I start to think, okay, I probably need to actually use some free transfers here. I would really consider at least doing Pedro Porro towards Munoz, but I actually think Porro versus West Ham is a much better fixture. It might just be the case that I play Van de Ven plus Munoz as well, right? Because that's just what the plan would be if I was to go out of Porro, because if you look at the games after that, Murillo still seems much stronger than Porro to keep within the squad. So that's kind of a piece to consider. It could also be, a week to consider whether I maybe should be using a different 4.5 defender. I tend to think that this is still okay. And I'd probably play Van de Ven over Murillo in this context, as opposed to actually playing Murillo versus Arsenal. I just can't see myself doing that. The midfield and sort of the attacking positions still look really strong, but I know a lot of people are considering a free at 4 on this week, especially if those people are on no Salah. But in my case, I think it's a tough week for everyone. You kind of stomach it, you move on. It's not even a great fixture, for example, for some of the Aston Villa picks that we've actually imparted into our team. For Game Week 5, though, I think that's just a really strong week, as you can see. So even if I don't make a transfer, I think the team does actually get towards Game Week 5 really strongly. But to sort of go back to the point in terms of Game Week 4, you'd probably have a couple of free transfers here. This is a good opportunity to, one, consider wildcarding if you need to, if you have a lot of problem picks. I think one thing that I learned last season with the amount of free transfers that we're able to save, it might actually be better to wildcard early, save a lot of free transfers, and then you have that insurance bank for the remainder of, let's say, the first half of the season. Another sort of way to look at it is this is a really good window to bring in the Crystal Palace players. So if you bring in the Crystal Palace players, I would bring them now, but keep in mind that they do have some tough fixtures, like for example in Game Week 6. In Game Week 5, I've just got a strong team. In Game Week 6, what I'm looking at here is once again a really weak team. Spurs have a nice game, and that's nice, but I think when I look at the rest of the field, Crystal Palace having 2 Liverpool players isn't exactly ideal. Jorginho's versus Chelsea away. This is the worst fixture for Brighton in the run. So this is a really good time to actually just pull the trigger on a free hit. And this is, when you think about this specific game week here, this is a perfect week to go into all these City players. We can actually, once again, assess the first 5 game weeks of Man City, see if players like Aït-Nouri are nailed, is Reinders nailed, is Marmoush actually nailed, who's probably the most exciting non-Haaland pick. And then just top up with the Haaland captaincy here, which I think I'd be really comfortable in doing. That's sort of my general plan now, a Game Week 6 free hit. And I really do like that because kind of when we look at Game Week 7 onwards, the team starts to actually continue to be relatively strong. It's still a really good fixture for Watkins, for example. He's probably a captaincy choice here alongside a Bruno. And then I've got some nice games for the rest of the team. But that's kind of the general plan in the meantime. Why do I have no transfers booked? That's simply because I think, once again, going to the point that I started with the video with, we know that there are going to be injuries. We know that there's going to be new information. We know that there's going to be transfer market movements. I've got Gakpo in my draft who, if Isak, let's say, joins Liverpool, I'd be quite worried about the minutes that he's going to get and how quickly that declines and decays. So by not pricing in too many transfers and thinking that I have one punt in Gakpo that I think I'm a little bit uncertain with, I'm happy to live with that and happy to know that he's probably going to price myself into a transfer in the future. But that's sort of the general idea here. I think I've got a pretty strong team. A lot will change. A lot of our interpretations of who is good, who is not good at this moment in time will fundamentally change with more information. So I think the plan is, as I said, to make sure that you actually have a robust team, to be comfortable with the players that you're picking. If you want to go for a punt, don't go for too many, and to kind of just enjoy the season. So that's going to be my Game Week 1 team selection for now. I will be doing a deadline stream today, or rather on Friday if you're watching this video, and I will be doing a deadline stream on Friday. So if I do any last minute tinkers, if there's any news to react to in terms of press conferences, so on and so forth, if I plan to go for a Wirtz draft, because I really can't pick between Watkins and Wirtz, we'll do that. But I'll see you guys then. Take care and goodbye, and hope you guys have a lovely start to the season and enjoy Game Week 1 and Premier League football.